Chapter 3. Stop that, Renee, Julie said harshly, walking over to the window. You don't have to get all crazy if I mention Danny. I didn't, Renee started. I'm completely over Danny, and I'm completely over the fact that, Julie hesitated, that I took Danny away from you. Is that what you started to say? Renee lay back on the lower bunk and stared at the wall. She didn't want this talk, didn't want to confront Julie on this subject. She wanted it buried in the past with the other memories. Julie shook her hair out of her face. You didn't take Danny from me, she said quietly. Renee turned back to face her. She could see that Julie wasn't going to stop. Julie was determined to discuss Danny. Renee took a deep breath. I guess it had to happen sooner or later, she told herself. You didn't take Danny away from me, Julie repeated, watching the tall pines through the window. That's what I realized this spring. It was all Danny. Danny chose to drop me and go out with you. You didn't force him. You didn't even want to at first, right? Well, yes, Renee said, embarrassed. Yes, it had happened. Yes, it had ruined their friendship. Yes, they hadn't spoken for months. Yes. Why do they have to talk about it all now? At first I thought I'd never forgive you, Julie said, still staring out the window. I was so hurt and so angry. But then I realized I was directing my anger at the wrong person. It was Danny I was angry at. It was Danny who had hurt me. It was Danny who had rejected me, who had made all the choices, not you. I guess somehow it was easier to be angry at you, easier than confronting my real feelings. Well, he's dropped both of us now, Renee said bitterly, staring up at the mattress above her head. Julie laughed. I guess that's what made me feel close to you again. What? What did you say? I said I think that's what made me feel close to you again. When Danny broke up with you too, we had something in common. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt you and I could really be good friends again, closer than before. Renee laughed, nervous laughter. The whole discussion was making her very uncomfortable. She didn't want to hear any explanations or confessions from Julie. She knew that Julie had been furious with her when she started going out with Danny, and of course, she remembered how bitterly the friendship had ended because of it. Renee also remembered that a few months later, after Danny had broken up with her too, Julie had suddenly reappeared in her life, and they had slowly begun to rebuild the close friendship they had had. What more was there to discuss? That's when I got the idea of our going away to camp together. It seemed like a great way to really repair our friendship, spending so much time together and letting it all hang out, our true feelings. Right, Renee said blankly. She wasn't the kind of person who let her true feelings hang out. She was private. She liked to keep things to herself, work things out in her own mind. I'm not like these kids who are into theater, Renee thought. They always have to be talking about their feelings, grabbing people, touching people, talking, living their lives out in public. Julie and George and Hetty, they all seemed so needy. The sun went behind a cloud, and the room suddenly grew dark. Renee waited for Julie to say more about Danny, but she didn't. I better get down to the water, Julie said, walking quickly to the closet, bending down and searching the floor for a towel. The weather changes so quickly here. I'll miss the sun, and I told Chip we'd be down. Now that she had said what she'd planned to do, Julie wanted to change the subject. She never really wanted to discuss Danny, Renee realized. It was like a little performance, a clear-the-air speech. She had probably rehearsed it for a long time. You've been a good friend, Renee said suddenly. Julie turned around, surprised. No, I mean it, Renee said. What you just said about Danny. That was really nice of you, and you didn't even get angry or jealous when I got the lead-in curtains and you're playing the maid. Let's not get all sloppy sentimental about this, Julie said. She stared hard at Renee as if trying to see into her brain. I got plenty jealous, Julie said, swinging a pink towel over her shoulder. Who do you think you are anyway? Renee laughed. I'm serious. Me too. Oh, Renee grabbed her forehead. Something had dripped on her. Hey! She felt another wet drip, this time on her arm. It couldn't be rain, she realized. Whatever it was felt warm. Besides, it was bright sunshine outside once again. Renee rolled out of the lower bunk to investigate. What's the matter? Something's dripping from the top bunk. The drips were dark red. What on earth? Renee stepped on the bottom bunk so that she could see up on her bed. Oh, good Lord! Something bulged under her blanket. The khaki blanket was drenched, now wine-colored with blood. Dark red blood had soaked through the mattress and was now dripping through to the bunk below. Julie, she fought off the wave of nausea that choked her. Julie, there's blood, and I think this is real. I think this time it's real. Chapter 4. What was under the blanket? Renee's knees went weak. She felt dizzy. Gripping the frame of the top bunk tightly, she waited for her head to clear. What is it? What is it? Julie was calling. She sounded so far away. What is it? Renee, what is it? Julie could have been a million miles away, but she was standing right next to Renee. She had climbed up onto the bed, too. Renee stared at the dark, wet blood. Was this another prank? Something told her it wasn't. There was only one way to find out. She took a deep breath, held it. Grasping the bunk frame with her left hand, she reached out for the top of the blanket. No, don't! Julie cried. Renee didn't seem to hear her. With a quick, decisive tug, she pulled back the blanket. Both girls gasped when they saw it. It was a swan, probably one of the swans that had lived in the Sound. Its eyes were rolled back in its head. Its beak lay open. Its neck was bent at an odd angle. Its throat had been slit, a long, deep cut, at least 3 inches long. Blood lay in a pool around the slit in the neck, seeping into the matted white feathers of the dead creature's arched body, soaking into Renee's sheet and mattress, so red, so blood red. Julie jumped down first. Renee, get down. Renee, can you hear me? The blood. All the blood. As Renee stared, she was no longer in the tiny dormitory room. She was back home, back with the blood of 3 years ago. Kenny's blood, so red, so blood red. She couldn't take her eyes off it. It was everywhere. It couldn't be his blood. Could it? All that blood, all that time ago. And here it was again. Here was the blood. Kenny's blood following her, following her, following her, following her, following her, following her. Renee, get down! Julie pulled her away. She fell back, but the blood stayed in front of her eyes. She fell on top of Julie. Both girls sprawled on the floor. Renee, are you okay? Ow, get off me! Julie's cries brought Renee back. She realized she had fallen on top of Julie. Sorry, really, I'm so sorry. She pulled herself to her feet, felt dizzy, sat back down on the floor. They both sat there for a while, not looking at each other. Did I hurt you? Renee asked finally. No, I'm okay, Julie said, but I had to pull you down. You were hypnotized or something up there. I don't know. Renee didn't know what to say. It was taking all her concentration to stay in the present. She didn't want to go back to the past, but she didn't want to stay in the present either. That swan, I don't believe Hetty. Julie scowled. She shook her curly hair out of her eyes. Hetty? Renee was concentrating. It wasn't his blood. It isn't his blood. It's a swan. It's just a swan. It's today. It isn't then. That Hetty's real subtle, isn't she? How disgusting! Julie climbed to her feet and started pacing the small room nervously. Hey, are you going to be all right? Yeah, sure, I guess, Renee said doubtfully. Yeah, I feel better. It's just she must have sneaked in here after she stormed out of rehearsal, Julie said, biting her lower lip. Can you believe it? Does she really think this is going to get her to the lead role? Does she think you're going to go running home to your mommy or something just because she put a dead swan in your bed? Maybe. Renee didn't know what to think. Do you really think Hetty could kill a swan like that? Just slit its throat? Don't you? Julie demanded, pacing faster. Of course she did. She probably didn't use a knife. She probably used her fingernail. Julie, how disgusting. How low can you get? Killing an innocent bird, and what silly juvenile symbolism. It's so babyish. She got her point across, Renee muttered. She looked down at her hand. It was smeared with dark blood. The blood was starting to cake. No, I didn't do it, she started to scream. She tried to rub the blood off, but it wouldn't come. What? Julie stopped pacing. What did you say? What? Renee hadn't heard herself scream. Nothing. I didn't say anything. Yes, you did, you said. Julie stopped. She could see that Renee was very upset. She decided it wasn't a good time for any kind of argument or discussion. What are we going to do now? Renee moaned. We're not going to let her get away with this, are we? Julie studied Renee's pale white face. She was trying to determine just how troubled Renee was, but the face hid much more than it revealed. No, we can't, but what can we do? It was more of a plea than a question. We'll kill something larger and put it in her bed, Julie declared. Did you ever see The Godfather? Maybe we'll get a horse. Still seated on the floor, Renee hugged her legs and buried her head in them. Just kidding, Julie said. Just trying to keep it light. Light, Renee repeated weakly. Well, what should we do? Julie asked herself. I guess we should go and tell Bax. Oh, for sure, Renee said sarcastically. That'll do a lot of good. You know what he'd say. Hold that feeling. Save that emotion. You know what? Bax probably put the swan in my bed to open up my feelings. Julie laughed, then she realized that Renee wasn't kidding. Get real. Bax owns this camp, remember? He's not going to run around killing swans and stuffing them into kids' beds in his own camp. I know you think he's cruel, Renee, but he isn't that cruel, and he isn't crazy. You're sure about that? Renee asked, but she realized she was just stalling. She didn't want to get up and clean up the mess, and mainly she didn't want to face the fact that another girl, a girl she had just met a few days earlier, hated her enough to do this cruel thing, hated her enough to kill another living creature. She climbed slowly to her feet. There was a knock on the door. Both girls shrieked. Julie, in her tiny bathing suit, was covered with goosebumps. Who is it? Renee called. Marcy, I heard screaming in there. Is everything okay? Julie pulled open the door. Hi, Marcy, come in. Everything isn't exactly okay, would you say, Renee? Not exactly. Marcy came in, acting bewildered. She was very short, 5 feet tall at the most, and she had short brown hair on a tiny round head. She reminded Renee of a cartoon mouse. She even spoke in a squeaky, high-pitched voice. What's wrong? Marcy asked, not venturing far into the room. There was an accident. Julie told her, pointing to the top bunk. Would you believe that a swan flew in the window and committed suicide in Renee's bunk? No, I don't think so, Marcy said uncertainly. We'll go take a look, Julie said, unable to suppress a devilish grin. Marcy took a few steps toward the bunk. No, Renee cried and held her back. Julie, it isn't funny. Why should she be upset too? Julie shrugged. There really is a dead swan in there. Renee told Marcy its throat was slashed. Someone put it in there to scare me, I guess. How awful, Marcy said, staring up at the bunk. Who could have done it? We think it was you, Julie joked. Marcy just stared at her, then she forced a laugh, a high-pitched giggle when she realized Julie was joking. My sense of humor always comes out at the worst times, Julie admitted. You look just like Cher, Marcy said suddenly. Did anyone ever tell you that? She has a funny sense of humor, too. Thanks, I guess, Julie said. You look just like Minnie Mouse, she thought. She scolded herself for being so mean-natured. We've got to get the blood out of here, Renee interrupted. So much blood today. Real blood, fake blood. She felt herself slipping back again. I'll help, Marcy volunteered. Are you okay, Renee? Renee? It took a while for Renee to realize that Marcy was talking to her. Yeah, fine. Thanks, Marcy. The girls wrapped the swan up in the bloody sheet. All 3 of them carried it to a trash can behind the dorm and stuffed it in. It took a lot of cleaning and scrubbing and mopping to get the blood up. After nearly an hour, all but a few of the stains had been removed. Renee carefully made up the new mattress with clean sheets. Good as new, almost, she said, forcing a smile. Are you going to tell Bax? Marcy asked. Yeah, I guess, sometime, Renee replied. She didn't really know if she would tell Bax or not. It was so hard to predict how he'd react. It might be more trouble than it was worth. Now I really need a swim, Julie said. Anyone coming with me? Renee and Marcy begged off. Marcy went back to her room next door. You sure you'll be okay? Julie asked Renee. I'll stay if you want. No, go. You've been trying to get down there for 2 hours, Renee told her. I'm just going to conk out for a while, try to get myself together. She saw that Julie was really concerned. I'll be fine, really. Go. Have a good time. Julie lingered for another moment, trying to decide what to do, then grabbed her towel and headed out the door. As soon as she was gone, Renee sank down onto the lower bunk. She knew she wouldn't be able to sleep. She didn't want to sleep. She was afraid of the dreams she might have. She just wanted to rest. Maybe if she could rest, the sick feeling would go away. The blood would stop pouring. The blood would stop flowing before her eyes. The blood. The blood. No. She sat up. She couldn't rest. If she closed her eyes, it would all be there, present and past. If she stayed in bed, the blood would drip again. No. She had to get out of there. All at once she knew what she had to do. She had to confront Hetty. She had to tell Hetty that her awful joke would not work. She had to let Hetty know that she would not be frightened away. The lead role. I have the lead role in a play by a real Broadway director, she suddenly remembered. This is the first good thing to happen to me in 3 years, and I'm going to hold on to it. No matter what. She jumped out of bed and went to the closet. I'll get changed and go find Hetty and let her know what I think of her and her stupid threats, she told herself. She felt better already. Taking action made her feel better. She told herself to remember that. Take action, Renee. Don't fall back. Don't slip back. Take action. Keep moving. Keep going forward. And maybe the past will be left behind. She pulled open the closet, reached in, and began sifting through her clothes. Wait a minute. No, something's wrong. Her clothes. Her clothes. It took her so long to realize. The jeans, the tops, her sweaters, her sweatshirts, the denim jacket, her one good dress, they were all cut up. Her clothes, in tatters, everything, all slashed to pieces.